You're listening to Modern Animism Radio. I'm your host, Laura Giles. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm joined by Cherie Calvert and Duane Hennessy from Down Under, and we're going to be talking about what it's like to grow up animist. So let's get started by acknowledging the elements and the ancestors. Acknowledge and thank the element of earth for our home, food, our bodies, and all the physical, sensuous, beautiful things that we so often take for granted. Acknowledge and thank the element of air for the opportunity to share ideas and communicate with those across the miles and across the veil. Acknowledge and thank the element of fire for clearing a path for new beginnings. We recently had that Sagittarius full moon eclipse, and that's definitely pushing some fire energy our way and helping us to step into our inner warrior. Acknowledge the element of water and thank you for helping us to go deep into our hidden places and purify what we find there. Acknowledge and thank our loving, helping ancestors from the human, plant, animal, and mineral kingdoms, and I thank you for all your help that we receive that is both seen and unseen. And as always, I send gratitude to all our listeners, and if any of our content inspires you, please consider donating to the program, and you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Pan Society. You can also show gratitude or give us a high five by liking, commenting, and sharing our posts on social media. Thanks. All right, welcome Cherie and Duane. Thanks for being here. How are you guys?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. A little mixed today.
Yeah.
We got the protests and all going on, Corona.
That's okay. It's like 5 a.m. over here. So.
Yeah. Thanks for getting up.
Right.
So, as you said, we're talking about growing up animists, and all three of us have that in common. Was there anything that made y'all feel different when you were growing up?
I think for me, considering like inanimate objects as conscious, sort of, it was a bit of an issue. So, you know, apologizing and walking into tables and cars and stuff. Well, I don't walk into cars, but you know what I mean? It becomes a bit of you realize that other people see the world differently. I think they see it mechanically, maybe. It's hard to understand how they see the world, but they see it as well, you know what it's like, right? So I'm talking to Animists, so I don't have to explain it too hard, but I label myself a vegan animist, animist vegan, they swap around, but vegan animist. So down to the smallest insect, and then you're moving on towards the pebbles and so on, and people are like, yo, but those things aren't conscious, and they're not, and you just, so I guess growing up vegan animist, the world is different, and I spend a lot more of my time in like my imagination maybe than most people do.
Okay. How about you, Cherie? Was it weird for you?
You know, I didn't notice a weirdness because at home, that's what we did. It's our practice. Yeah. And, you know, with my sister, my mom, my dad, maybe not so much because he grew up differently. But he did acknowledge things that we did as well. But I didn't notice it until school. Like when you go and your friends are not. Like I started school in the U.S. and you notice it's very different, like how you act, how you eat, what you show reverence for. And then I started to think, either I'm different or they're different. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah. I didn't really notice a difference actually until I went into, like much later, till I went into an animist community. Mm-hmm. And then I saw everybody doing the same thing. And then it was like, oh my God, this is so different. You know, because in mainstream life, nobody acknowledges anything. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no gratitude. There's no, yeah.
Would that be like, it's very much like that here, but I wonder if that's mainstream Western society as opposed to, and not all like, you know, you have Latin American society, which I actually like a lot, which is kind of different. And we're very much a no-touch sort of society. Like you sort of, yo, hands off, man, stand back, you know. It doesn't have that sense of feeling.
Yeah.
Animals are seen as utilitarian. Insects are killed. Pebbles are kicked. mountains have holes drilled for them to make roads. And
Yeah.
in New Zealand recently, you may have read it, they gave, it's like human rights to one of their rivers.
Yeah.
They got it being this. And I think that's the beginning of seeing the world in a different way. And as an animist, you're probably more careful about the world. You protect it more than just plunder it for resources, as they say.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up about New Zealand, because I actually don't agree with that. I mean, I get where it's coming from, but to give a river human rights, it's not a human, and it doesn't need human rights, and they have to be protected by humans. So I get the heart of that, but I don't think it's speaking to the problem. The problem's not the river. The problem is us.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's this problem with this legal system. Everything is revolving around us, basically. And I have a major issue with that too. And I think that devalues other sentient beings and beings within our entire universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, you got to run it by me first. I mean, somebody's going to have to uphold that law. And if the person who's responsible for that doesn't get it, then it doesn't have a whole lot of value.
That's true. The other issue is laws can be repealed.
Yeah.
And I always find that an interesting thing that people, up until this COVID-19, I was working in an office most of the time, with little mill moths floating around everywhere. They just sort of flutter around. And I guess as they get more hungry, they get a bit slower, so they're easier to catch and take outside. But you just sort of, well, what do I do at this point? Do I save the mill moth because its value is as equal to a human as, and most people wouldn't understand that. It's like, what? It's just a moth, man. It's like, no, it's equal. It's life, And if you don't save it, every now and then you'll hear a clap. You're like, oh, this automatic response, it just, right? So you see me running around the office with this plastic container my friend got me with a lid, trying to catch his mill moth. What's interesting about that is that over time, over years, I guess, people will come in and say, hey, on the weekend I saw a cockroach, and instead of squashing it, I'm like I didn't need that detail, but carry on. I took it outside, and I'm like, okay, that's really cool. And people will start calling you over to their desk, and then it started moving on to the plants. So I was very much into plants in the office, and people are like, oh, can you help this plant? And I'm like, you're coming to me like I'm a guru on plants. I'm not. I just grow cactus and stuff, right? They're easy. But they started taking these things into consideration. You're not just throwing a plant in the bin because it's getting old because you didn't water it for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's how you change the culture, though. Like, you lead by example, and people will follow along once they start to see the impact that it has.
Yeah.
That's true. Very much when you think about the children, I guess. Like, I never had children. I just have a nephew who's got kids and so on. And you see that they pick up on these things. They pick up on the stuff you don't say.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is where it really needs to start.
Well, kids are natural animists anyways. I mean, I think they see more than we do. I mean, they're closer to spirit, and they have such imaginations that haven't been crushed yet, So I really like talking to kids and just hearing about their interpretations of stuff, because I feel like I can learn from them.
And they're much more compassionate towards creatures and things out there. And if you notice, like, they name everything. I mean, I still do, but like, they'll name rocks, they'll name, so it's, they have that genuine animism to them, and that compassion to them.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing you bring that up, because I've got 2 cars in the garage that are both female and French. So and I've got names. So I've got Pearl and I've got Kiki. Both of them like
nice.
But I've noticed that people will name their cars. I'm like, hey, you gave your car personality. I don't know if it was obviously not in the same thing like the animist sense, but there are things that people will name and give a personality. I had a hairdresser who had a car called Chester because it was an orange car. It was an old Saab, and it was a male. I'm like, hey, that's interesting. So females have male cars. But as a kid, you name a lot of things. I think one of the things you brought up earlier, which I never bring up with anyone is that as a kid, I had a symbolic, I call it symbolic imagery, right? I don't want to call it spirit animal, any of that common terminology, because it's not. It's what I grew up with. And it was always this Black Panther. And you'd be like, okay, so I've got a Black Panther, and it's kind of interesting. You can sort of call on it for things and so on. I'll say it hasn't actually got a name other than Panther. I do have another sort of spirit being hanging around as well, who's more human. And I remember years and years ago, I was doing fine art and I had a girlfriend at the time. And I remember going to sleep, and did I ask that my Panther being look over us? I'm not sure, but I remember she woke up and said, hey, I had a dream about this black cat. I was like, wow, okay, how cool is that? There's been a few of those events and you're like, okay, so there's obviously more to this than meets the eye. There's more to it than what science is trying to find. Like in science, everything has to be mechanical.
Yeah.
It's beyond that. And it's good to get that sort of ratification that something happened.
Yeah.
You know, other people have experienced this. So yeah, as an early age, I wonder, as animists, did you have any kind of spirit beings appear to yourselves in dreams, in real life?
Endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because that's just was normal. It's like, don't you? You know? You know, so it wasn't something that you would not talk about. You know, I mean, it's like we were talking about dreams the other day, and you know, you just share your dreams. It's not like this, oh, it's just a dream thing. It's like, oh, maybe you got a big message from spirit, so share your dream. It was like, you know, more of that. Because you never know when it's going to be something amazing that needs to be shared, so you would just talk about it openly. And there was always a lot of kids at our house, and all of that was just wide open and stuff. And I know, looking back now, I mean, it must have been like, wow, those people are crazy. But there were so many of us that it just wasn't weird, you know? I think if I was like an only child, it would have been totally different.
Yeah. My mom was big into dreams, and so she did it with my sister and I. Every morning it was, how'd you sleep? What'd you dream about? And we talked about it. We talked, and it could be wild, crazy. And we talked about it like it was normal, natural, and we broke it down. And I thought, it's funny because I would think everybody would do this. So when I would talk to my dreams and they're like, oh, or talk to my friends, they'd be like, oh, I had a nightmare last night. I'm like, oh, what was it? Like, let's dissect it. And they're like, why? Like, I was being chased by a murderer. And I was like, well, that could really mean.
Yeah.
Definitely made relationships different and interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting there's the parent element to that, because it's my mother on my side who's more into this kind of thing than, I remember I saw a book on a shelf. So I grew up in England until I was like 14 and we moved to Australia. So I remember this book on a shelf when we were living in England, witchcraft, and it was the Gardenian one. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that's all about, and she mentioned that she had spirit guides and stuff. And there's a real sort of mixed element there, but these events that you just go, okay, so that explains some of these events. Like my grandmother, I remember walking out, this is a strange one. I remember walking out of her house, and I think I would have been 2 or 3 years old. Right? I've got memories way back, but this one was interesting. I remember walking out, it was stormy, there was lightning, and I saw 2 clowns dancing around the corner, and I'm like, "Ew, clowns!" Right? And that stuck with me forever. It drove me nuts, thinking, "Did I imagine that? What happened?" And it was only years and years later, and my grandmother would have been maybe 80 something, and she said, "Do you remember when you went outside the house and you saw 2 clowns dancing?" I was like, "Whoa, seriously?" So that was very interesting to me, because I thought, so that did happen. I did see that. I've never worked out what the hell it meant. Right? I did do clowning for a while, much later in life as a start. So maybe it meant, hey, your future is as a clown, and maybe I missed the calling. But yeah, those events are interesting, and shared events too. Where friends acknowledge something, you're like, okay, so you saw that too. And I think that's important in a society that pretty much ridicules on a constant basis anything outside of the norm, anything outside of what sells, what can be physically measured.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. That's why when people, I totally get being rational, because looking at the other spectrum and the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of people who believe in all kinds of stuff that I'm just like, wow, you know. So I think there needs to be balance, but I'm not all that worried about stuff that we can't validate, because there's a lot of stuff that I believe is real that we can't validate. Mm-hmm. I just have no way of knowing, but I can tell you that I know.
It's that empirical sort of, if someone's experienced it, then something happened. I cannot turn around and say, well, that did not happen because I wasn't there. I didn't experience it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of that, and it seems to be sold as rationality, as being logical, and all these things are sold as this is a good thing, but it actually denies a lot of experiences people have. It denies a lot of events that happen where there is evidence, and we just pile it away somewhere and ignore it. It was too hard to explain.
But I do think you still see, or we still see too, people who just really want to believe so bad that somebody tells them something. I just heard somebody who said something like, she talked to a psychic. The psychic told her that her relationship was really bad, and that if she wanted her to stop it, then she would just have to pay her, you know, some money, and she would take care of it for you. I'm like, girl, you're getting scammed. You know, there is like this thing of discernment. You got to be able to pay attention to what's real and what's not real. Everybody's not nice, and everybody in the spirit world is not nice. So you got to know that. I mean, there's a lot of love and light, and, you know, ultimately, I think big picture, everything does come from love. But in this dualistic, complementary dualistic world we live in, everything is not love and light. And I think I mean, I'm not saying you got to agree with that. I'm saying this is what I think. And I think if you think that you're not going to get in trouble by experimenting and, you know, just going off into the spirit world and doing stuff, you know, you got to be careful. You just got to be careful.
I agree with that. We had a discussion many years ago. I was on this group that did astral projection and so on and so forth, and we discussed that, and someone was talking about the spirit world. I said, listen, just because it's beyond our physical world doesn't make them like gods in a sense.
Right.
You don't have to go out and thinking they're all benevolent. You just approach other beings as you would approach another human being.
Right.
You don't know. You got to figure it out. Okay, so yeah, it's in a lot of the stuff I see sold, like when New Age came out, and I had a friend who owned a New Age shop. So I used to sell New Age trinkets and that. And you'd be sitting there going, some of this stuff that I'm hearing people saying is, some of it's self-deception, some of it is genuine, you know. And I have a real problem with a stereotypical image of what you should be as a spiritual person. And I have these discussions in core every now and then, you know. The idea that a human can be peaceful all the time, I find hard to digest, because it just doesn't seem to be in our nature. You're all very spiritual till you stub your toe into the door frame, and then you just go nuts, right? So I think, to me, to try and achieve that image is to just try and change your behavior. It's not to discover anything spiritually. You may discover something, but to me, to look for that spiritual connection, you don't know what's there until you find it. You're on a path of discovery, not a path of, I want to be like this. I can do that tomorrow. So yeah, I think, yeah.
It's not about enlightenment. I think if you're trying to achieve that whole love and light, that's all you want to be, you're not acknowledging your shadow side. You're not acknowledging the dark part of you, which we all have. There's a balance. There is, you know, light or dark or shadow or gray, whatever you want to. I don't like saying black and white because I don't think it's that distinctive, but there is that. Like, we all have it. We are living, breathing beings. We have emotions. We have all of these. So to sit there and say, oh, I'm just peace and love and light, and I'm not making fun of anybody, but it is denying a part of yourself. And how whole are you if you're doing that?
Mm-hmm. And there's a place for all of that. You know, I mean, when the rebel comes out, you might need to blow some stuff up. Or if the creator comes out, maybe it's time to birth something new. I mean, you know, it's balance. Mm-hmm. So I think if I denied myself any of that, I would be holding myself back. I would be holding myself back from wholeness. you know, I don't need to live there, but maybe I want to stick my toe in, or maybe I want to visit or linger, you know. And I think, to me, that's part of having a full experience. And that's why if somebody says, if you do X, it's going to hurt you, I'm not necessarily going to say no. You know me. I mean, I'm not going to hurt anybody else, but if it means that I'm going to get to the other side more whole and richer and fuller and stronger, I'm probably going to say yes. I mean, look, see this? That's the acupuncture. That's what the acupuncture does. I look like domestic violence, right? It's a bruise. Isn't that crazy? I did that yesterday. My acupuncturist. And
is that like a 9-inch nail?
What? It's crazy. It's crazy. And I thought I was gonna have an out-of-body experience. It hurt so bad. So what happened is, I know, crazy. I thought maybe I dislocated my shoulder or frozen shoulder, something like that. And I'm on the table. I am screaming. I'm crying. And I like I said, I thought I was going to have an out-of-body experience. I thought I was going to throw up. It hurt so bad. But I knew that when he got done, I was going to feel really good. I got 90% range of motion walking out. So that's what I mean. You know, I'll do it if it means that I'm going to feel better after.
That's very similar to. Oh, sorry, Cherie.
Go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
That just reminded me of some of those initiation rites and passages in shamanism, especially in South America, where they had each day. There's not that I'd sit there smoking cigarettes, but there was a lot of cigarettes in this documentary I saw, and a lot of taking different kinds of hallucinogenic things and other stuff. And I'm like, whoa, man, like that's serious stuff, right? But it's to get to the end result.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cherie, you're going to say something?
Yeah, so I almost lost my train of thought because I was like getting sucked into your tell me more. But no, so it's one of those things, traveling back to what Laura was saying and what you were saying too, when we try to do this whole love and light thing, especially like if you're trying to attain guru, and I say this with quotations, status, if you don't acknowledge those things too, and you're leading these people to believe that that's what you're supposed to achieve, it sucks when you see that what their shadow side actually is, where you have the I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but like the leaders who are either gatekeepers or the ones that are sexually assaulting their followers, or, you know, there's like a lot of that, and that's not love and light, and that's, you know, and I wonder if you were acknowledging that you have needs and things like that, you wouldn't abuse your privilege, your rights, or not rights, but your position and your privilege.
Yeah.
And when you're leading people, and then it makes you look like you're falling so much harder too, because someone's always looking for you to do this. If you were trying to, you know, portray this perfect image of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. We were in Moon Circle one day, and as we were going around, we're not supposed to. What's said in Moon Circle stays in Moon Circle, so I'm going to keep it super general. But somebody said, as we were sharing, they were sharing kind of a dark story, and she said, and I am that. And I got it, because what that said to me was she was acknowledging that whatever it is, all things in the world, I am that. I am the prostitute, the murderer, the lover, the teacher, the healer, the, you know, fill in the blank with whatever. And I'm not going to say that I could never do whatever, because that's a place of self-righteousness. And it's making me separate from you. It's making me separate from myself. And I thought, you know, that's something that I would say, but to hear it coming out of somebody else's mouth was so powerful to me. And I really needed to witness that, because it was a validation of how powerful it is to stand in your light and your shadow. You know, and it's so compassionate to look at somebody, the homeless person on the street, and say, I am that. I mean, not in this moment, but I am that. I am you. You know, we are one. So it's not just you're a sentient being and you're powerful in your own right, but I am you. And I think we need to be reminded of things like that. Like for me, it's going out at night and looking at the sky that's just totally lit up with stars, and you just like, oh my God, and on one hand, it's like so humbling, be like, oh, I'm so small and I'm so puny, and my light's going to be out in a second. But then another, to look up and be like, oh my God, I am that. It's also really expansive and exciting too. And so if I get in my pity party, I'm just like, okay, cut that out, look up, get a reality check here.
That's an interesting. Thinking something similar in terms of being a part of the entire process of life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people miss that, and they worry about it. I don't understand it, and I haven't come close to death yet. But a lot of people worry about the death side of life. It's like, dude, you can't avoid it. We didn't evolve to last. That's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
But that's sort of part of the process. There's a definitive beginning and an ending for me. There might be something else afterwards. There might have been something before. But acknowledging that that's a part of the process of life that I'm a participant in. And I think a lot of people miss that. They seem to we're trying to extend the life of people. Probably people with money will get those opportunities. But you sit there going, why do you want to do that? I mean, there's a reason for this.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's an ending. I mean, in the Egyptians, I read that the Egyptians called it westerning or westing, like going off to the Western world or some things. They never really saw it as an ending, but they acknowledged it was there. And guess being human, they probably didn't. Everybody wants a natural death, right? You don't want to go unnaturally, and you want it to be peaceful and as painless as possible. That may not happen, but when this coronavirus hit, I remember saying to my parents in England, I got two lots of parents, I said, listen, I may get it, I may survive it, I may not, but that's fine. That's just the way things are going to be. We didn't evolve to last, so that's the way it happens. And I'm more at peace with that sort of aspect. But it's kind of interesting to me. Everyday people are just inculcated into this certain belief that this is the world and this is it, and you have to live as long as you want, as you can. And there's no learnings in that. There's no looking outside. There's no existential questions. It's just, how can I get the car that's better than my neighbor's,
Yeah.
So I am that, and being a participant in life rather than this is me and that's life.
I wouldn't want to live forever because, there is a, what would you call it, a lifespan to the body and the experience. And it's kind of like life, actually. So, I like what I'm doing, but eventually I want to do something else. And I like where I am, but eventually I want to be somewhere else. And if there's reincarnation, it gives me an opportunity to do that. So I get to trade into a different model, different gender, different place in the world, and to me, I'm all about adventure. So that's just adventurous to me.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to live long. Like I just I still want to be able to move around on my own, have my own faculties. And I think once that starts to go, I feel like I've lived a great life. So if I do die tomorrow, I'm okay. I'm not gonna, be terribly upset. And I hope nobody's upset for me. I hope, I hope it's a great, funeral that, she jumped off that cliff and that's what happens. But yeah, because I'm always, I like adventure too. And I like learning things, and I know, I hope that continues. I hope, whatever life or whatever happens next, that's always going to be available for me.
This might sound whack, but I think, so I didn't used to always feel this way, but as I get older, I think that if I don't want this, I'm not claiming this, but if I were to lose my mental faculties, if I were to become infirm, I think that would be an interesting adventure too. If I'm born in the next life as a murderer or something, I think that would be an interesting adventure too. And right, you don't want that. But because there's, nobody wants to be the murderer, right? The bad guy. But
right.
The opposite side of that, though, there's teachings in that. So I have a friend who's a murderer. I didn't know this for a long time. He didn't tell me until we were really, really good friends. And when he told me, I was in shock because you think of that being one of the worst things in the world that a person could ever do. I think child abuse is worse, but it's one of the worst things you could ever do. And this is not the face that I had of him. And it was such a humbling experience. One, that he would confide in me that was his history, because of the trust. And two, it gave me another picture of what that looks like. I mean, hopefully, if he's not like a mass murderer on a killing spree, it's one moment in time based on one decision, or a series of crazy decisions, and I could still see his humanity. And he's a really good person. You know, he helps animals and old people and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think when we think about these titles, we got to think about that, because he really is more than that. And it helps me to expand the way that I look at people and humanity. And, you know, you really do have to see the whole, is what I'm saying. And I think too, for the soul's experience, you know, the people that were involved in that, the families, the person whose life he took, all of that was, everybody in that has a price or a piece to play. And let's say that for my soul's evolution, I needed to experience that grief or that loss. Somebody's got to help me to have that. So to me, it looks like it's a sacrifice. It's a gift for me to have that experience. You can't have it if there's no bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that he'd be labeled a murderer, but maybe a soldier would be labeled a hero. I mean, what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
It's just a case of who's backing who,
yeah,
and in what perspective we're going to look at that scenario or that person.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's nothing unnatural, is it? I mean, you look at humans in the past, there's been murders. It was a natural part of life. And there's some things we won't bring forward. I remember someone saying, well, if we look in the past, that some people say, oh, we had these morals and this is what we used to do. He said, yeah, but we also used to rape and murder. Right. We really want to bring those things forward with us, okay? So we tried, obviously not the rape and the murder, we try to say, well, it's against the law, but a law doesn't stop it happening.
Right.
And it reminds me of those tribes in the Amazon they filmed for a while in their anthropological study, where they split into two groups, and then one group run down and hit the others with, I don't know, some kind of machete or axe, and you're like, my God, you know, it's down to this. Whatever's happened has come down to this, and the solution was murder. The only problem I got a problem with murder, but the biggest problem I got with it, other than the animal side, being a vegan and all, is that as we're not socially advancing, we're technologically advancing, and our weapons are much more dangerous now.
Yeah.
And I think in the recent events, which I've been watching in Minneapolis and around America, I watch NBC Live and all morning, I'm just watching this, is that the government response instantly is to send more arms and armed people in to fix it. And I'm like, wasn't that the problem in the first place?
Right. That's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Total lunacy.
It's the escalation. And I mean, you got, someone once said you've got leaders who are very comfortable to be sitting on the precipice of total devastation. Nuclear weapons.
They're so far removed. They're not looking in the eyes of the people on the ground floor here. There's no connection. And that's the part with war today, right? We have these weapons where we don't have to look the person in the face anymore when we're killing them, or they're killing us. Like it's a disconnect, like a very big disconnect.
And that's an important point I think you made there too, that I was reading an article about these drone fighter jet things that will fly with jets and carry out the most dangerous missions. And everyone's going, oh, wow, isn't this like cool, like artificial intelligence and that? I said, this is all very cool, yes, except it's there to kill us.
Yeah.
You're missing the point, okay? And we spend a lot of money and a lot of effort in learning to kill us or people like us somewhere else. Yeah. And you're like, when will this madness stop? When will it stop? And that's what I think an animist point of view or an animist philosophy of life would remove most of those problems, because everything has its own beingness. You're affecting everything now. You take that into consideration. You know, when I walk down the hallway, I take into consideration that, well, for me, my house has kind of a spirit too, and that's taken into consideration as I walk down the hall, and I'm like, she's got a name. I'm not going to say it. She's got a name like ours. But And when I sit outside, to me, just having that sunlight hit the garden, and that event has its own beingness. And then you begin to realize how miraculous this is.
Yes.
That life on this planet, if we were the only life in the universe, we're crazy to try and extinguish it for any stupid egotistical reason.
Right.
But when you see that and you realize what that is, and you go, my God, this is absolutely amazing. What I'm going through now is amazing. It overrides the concept of death, of what's going to happen to me later as I become a part of whatever's next. You know, it overrides a lot of these, what we call, well, I guess, egotistical pettiness among leaders.
Mm.
I mean, like, he said that, I said this, I think we should. It's like watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta, which I hate to admit. Okay, so I watch it.
I love that.
That's it. I'm a Kenya Moore fan, Team Kenya. But you just see, as they get to these levels, there's these little petty things that blow out of all, you know, and if they just sat back and said, wow, check this out, man. I'm like sitting here in Atlanta at a table with these people, the lights bouncing off, the birds are flying. This is amazing. Mm-hmm. That just changes everything.
I think Corona has helped, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think I see more people with chickens, because, you know, we had that egg shortage, and people's like, oh, where am I going to get my eggs? I got to get my chickens. So there's a lot of people with chickens, and if they're processing chickens for meat, then, you know, that gets you closer to, what does this mean? You can't just go out into the grocery store and pick up a chicken. You got to actually kill it, and you have to watch its life force leave, and that is not an easy thing to do. I mean, we think, oh, you know, I'll step on this bug, no big deal. You start killing mammals and it gets real personal real quick, you know, or if you, whatever kind of food you're getting, it gets real personal. And if I'm seeing more people too at farmers markets, because they just don't have the stuff that they had at the store. So you gotta go somewhere, and it makes them closer to their food. It makes them closer to the grower. And I'm seeing real differences in that. And, and people's response to food, and like, oh my God, this is precious. It is precious. It's food.
Well, one of the cool things about that, like with, and I'm not saying Corona's cool and all, but watching so many people go back to gardening, like seeds are sold out in all the stores. When has that ever happened? Plants, like all the plants that were delivered are gone. And I was reading this article, and I wish I remembered what it was so I could credit whoever wrote it. But they were talking about how gardening is ancestral. It's going back to our ancestors' roots. So it's comfort for us. Yeah. So in the beginning, it wasn't necessarily about food shortages and the food supply being cut off. This was our ancestral comfort. Like, our ancestors were gardeners, and so we were going back to that. And I love that. Like, it really resonated with me, because I have a lot of people, I was getting a lot of questions from a lot of people, because I post my photos all the time of my plants and everything like that. And they're like, hey, how do I do this? What do I do this? And then I was like, there's so many of you. And then some of them, I'm like, I don't know if I would trust you with a plant. I get it. Like, I totally get that going back to home. Like, it feels like home, even though they didn't know what it was. They're talking, you know, they're like, oh yeah. And now they're like showing off their little plant babies and whatever they're growing. And I'm like, I'm loving all of it. Like,
it's interesting. The change is like, well, I made my first sourdough for a long time the other day. And you're sitting there babying this little starter, like, oh, the little yeasts, and you're like, oh, it's probably getting too warm, but I put it in the fridge, but I have to, and it's like this little baby, because you know anything you do is going to change the way it behaves, and you lose your starter. But you're right, we had the similar thing. We had the seeds. It's crazy that we have a worldwide event that's kind of serious, and the first thing people worry about is what they're going to wipe their backsides with. I mean, they just emptied the toilet rolls. I'm like, seriously? You can't.
Did you guys have that issue too?
Yeah, it was crazy. We got plenty of toilet roll. I mean, we've only got 24 million people in the country. We got plenty of toilet roll. But everybody grabbed toilet roll, and I'm like, okay, so I'll order mine from eBay. And I actually found a toilet roll I like better. So I think I keep ordering from eBay. But I remember then saying to Campbell, my wife, I was like, okay, so I think we looked at a pizza base in the supermarket, and I'm like, why is the ingredients starting with X and Z in this thing? I'm like, what's that? So you know what? I'll just make one. So I go to get the flour. Of course, you look on the shelf and go, where'd all the flour go? When did everybody suddenly become bakers?
Yeah.
No yeast, no flour. No.
Isn't that crazy?
It's
I
mad.
don't understand that.
I don't understand their logic either, because the first thing I didn't think when I heard pandemic, the first thing I didn't think of was I need to go get toilet roll, and then I need to get flour and yeast. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah. I'm not a bread eater, so I don't know. It doesn't affect me, and I don't get it either. Somebody who's never baked a loaf of bread in your life, and that's what you're doing.
Right. Not one of the simplest things to start with.
No. It's interesting you bring that up. I started baking. So I made my, I think I did the pizza dough first. And it turned out pretty okay. Like, I'm like, thick crust, like, yeah. So then I made these cinnamon scrolls, and they turned out really okay.
You go, boy.
I start baking, right? Yeah. And I'm knocking out breads and that and going, this ain't hard. Why are we buying this crap? So this is actually quite easy to do. Then I find out from my bio father, so I've got 2 fathers, 2 mums. He says, oh, your grandfather and your great-grandfather were master bakers. I'm like, seriously?
Oh.
Now you tell me? I'm like, this was my calling and I've missed out for like 50 years. I didn't know. And it just turns out I can seem to bake stuff and pull it off. It doesn't seem to be an issue for me. Yeah, I was like, hey, kind of handy right now. But now I'm not buying bread at all. I'm like, I prefer what I'm baking. But that sort of genetic thing that passes on, the interesting thing, actually, speaking of animism and the process of life and so on, I grew up in a family where, so I got my biological mother, and then I got my dad, and then overseas I got my bio father and my mum over there. Now, I never knew my father until 2014, when he contacted me via Messenger, on Facebook. So I never knew him. I think he left when I was 1. There's a hell of a lot gone on in that history. But I grew up thinking in a lot of ways I was individual, okay? So my view, my animism and all this thing, well, that probably mostly come from my mother, but I was very much an individual. I was different to the rest of the family. I built myself up. I was into Jungian psychology and various things. I was completely opposite to them in a lot of ways. And then in 2014, my bio father and I started talking, and my God, it down to the sort of pastimes I chose. Like, he plays tennis endlessly. As a kid, I would play tennis after school, before school, on weekends, non-stop. Almost like the Michael Jordan of tennis. I just did not stop, right? And then the way I look at the world, he does the same thing. The way I approach things, and after a while, you sit there and go, hold on, it's 90% of my behaviors from you, genetically. Mm-hmm. And has he gone into the past, to the ancestor of baking and that? And you sit there going, so how does this play into how the world works? Could we breed animism into the human race? Is it something that, I don't want to bring up, what do you call it? Selective breeding, because we had issues with that in the past, right? Quite a bit. But it's like, is this something that is also genetic? Does it pass on? Are there peoples who have more animism because it's in the genes to be, over time, they've become more animist?
So,
sorry, Carrie.
No, I love that, because for me, I think there are ancestral connections that do pass on.
I do too.
Because, and a lot of it's not absolutely learned behavior. Some of it is genetically in us. And I also think that our ancestors are always speaking to us as well. I think there are so I think it depends on how far removed you are from respecting that culture, because I think there are families that have just moved so far away from animist practices that the voices are a little bit quieter from their ancestors and stuff. So I think everybody has it in their background somewhere. I mean, if we think about it, for the cradle of life, we all came from the same place somewhere way back in the day. So we all have it in us. It's just how far away we got from it, and how some of us are still close enough to it. But then also I'm seeing a lot of people returning back to it as well. Like it's feeling natural. They're opening their hearts. They're listening. Times like this happening is helping them get back to that point of listening to an ancestor. And this is my humble opinion. So
I agree with that, but I also agree that let's say that I'm a New Yorker, I've never been in nature before. I think I could, as that person, have a real strong connection too, and just, not know why. Because I think, I've had spirit contact with energies. I'm like, I don't know who that was. You don't look like what you should look like. And then later on, you found out, oh my God, you make the connection, and it just doesn't mean anything to you at the time because you don't have the context.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes, I mean, I'm talking like way back. Like, I know what my genetic history is because my dad's a genealogist. So I know like my recent, meaning like last 500 years is, plus the ancient. And I've had some people that I believe are like ancient, like 10,000, 40,000 years ago, come to me, and I'm like, I don't know who you are. Why are you talking to me? And it has to be from that time period. And those people don't look like what they look like today. So you're like, oh no, you can't be that. But then you find out later, oh, that's not what they look like. Oh, that's not what they dress like. Because it's just a different time period.
Right. Plus our mental perception of what we think they are supposed to look like because of television and movies and things like that. We think that all Vikings were white and, and blue-eyed, and they weren't. And so
yeah, I think I heard it was only 8,000 years ago that pale skin came into being. That's not a long time at all. That's not a long time at all.
That's a very interesting concept. I don't know if you saw, I don't know if I posted the article to Pan Society or not, about the first Britons were actually people of color,
mm-hmm.
between brown to very dark skin with blue eyes. And you said, hey, that's kind of cool, right? But then over time, there's an evolutionary change to absorb more vitamin D. Now, I've lived in the northern hemisphere in England. I just remember, I think there was sun at some point. Because now I live in Australia, it's like, wow, it's like 23 degrees and I'm cold. My friends in England are like, what? We'd be out in shorts and t-shirt. Like, man, you're kidding me. But, and it's just, if we look at it as an evolutionary adaptation, how does that then become a point of difference where we consider that we're better than other people? How does that work? And not just our society is like, I work in IT, so we have a lot of people from India and the Philippines and that working with us. And there's even in Indian society, there's people putting paler skin as better than darker skin on that sort of metric. And South America, similar thing. I remember being in Mexico and it just blew me away. There's this one scene, I was in Querétaro and we were in the Fiesta Americana Hotel. We had breakfast, right? Best breakfast buffet in the world, I swear. And these two, this whole Mexican family appears with lots of kids, and there's these two women done up to the nines, hair everywhere, high heels, very much, hey, look who we are, okay? We got money or something, whatever it is. I was just sitting back and observing this, right? And they're walking in and out of the doors of this like restaurant. I'm like, yeah, we know who you are, sit down. Like Australia, or like, come on, chill out, man, just sit down and just get over it. But anyway, they're doing all this sort of behavior, and I'm like, okay, so they come for money. And then suddenly it was like they disappeared. And I said to my wife, what happened there? They're just sitting down and it's all quiet. And this older woman turns up with I don't know if it's a son, a bodyguard. She was much older. She looked very Spanish, white as. And she comes in and it's like, wow, this is what I was told when I arrived in Mexico and spoke to Mexicans. They're this strata in society. And literally, these women, their behavior changed as soon as she appeared. She was obviously on the top of society and on our city hierarchies that we have. I'm an anarchist, so I don't believe in hierarchy. But and you're sitting there going, my God, did you see how that changed? I said, there's two things. Either she's like socially, she's high on the pedestal and the behavior changes, or she's the mother of some drug cartel boss and everybody's going to just be quiet. But it's interesting, the world over has this pale skin thing. And I wish I could find this article where someone did some research on the Egyptian friezes within the pyramids and so on. And I remember I did some study when I was going to do a talk on color, because I like color, as you can see with the stuff I'm wearing and so on. I looked into the color of Egypt, and they had certain colors to represent certain people. So sort of African was the painted black people, the Asiatics, as they call them, were more yellow, and then it was the brown Egyptians. But there was never a white person in there. Apparently, the white people you see was from vandalism to put us in there much later when those friezes were found. Wow, seriously?
That's crazy.
And I've never found the article since. I got to look for it again. But I was reading it. I was like, you're kidding me. So we literally put ourselves in there. I say ourselves because obviously I'm white. And put ourselves in history. Hey, we were in Egypt. No, we weren't.
That's crazy.
I mean, that vandalism of those artifacts or those antiquities just to, rewrite history, which I guess is what is very much known of where we come from for your rewriting history.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's been really cool catching up with you guys and talking to you. We ought to do it again.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Cool.
I'm up. I'm usually up at 4:20 in the morning. So yeah, 5's all right for me.
Okay. Well, thanks all the listeners for joining us. You know where to find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're everywhere, and we'd love for you to join the conversation too. Hope to see you on Pan Society soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.